Hello, everyone. Welcome to another fantastic episode of Jumping with Jumi, where we have the most fun, relevant, and relatable conversations about your health and wellness. I am your host, Jumi, and I'm super excited that you all are here today because we're going to have a dynamic conversation about medical cannabis. We're going to talk about how it can be a safe and effective natural medicine to treat many different conditions. To really help us understand what this little yet powerful plant can do for us, I've got two people here who are going to help us close this information gap and educate us on the benefits of cannabis. You'll hear from an emergency physician who is also the owner of a medical cannabis educational platform, plus the CEO of a global therapeutic medical cannabis company. But before we do that, let me know where you're watching from and if your state is one of those 36 states that have a medical marijuana program publicly available. And of course, make sure to like this broadcast, share it, start a watch party, because it is going to be a very fun time. So you know what time it is, y'all. It is time to jump right in. Our first guest is one of the national leading voices for medical cannabis policy reform. She is committed to educating the South Florida community on the multiple benefits of cannabis as medical treatment for chronic pain, mental illness, seizure, and inflammation. Community outreach work is an integral part of her commitment to provide access to those who need it most. And I'm super happy that she's here. So please help me in welcoming Dr. Lynn Lassiter. She's coming on. Dr. Lynn, are you there? Think she's coming on, y'all. There she is. Hey, Dr. Lynn. You can't hear you, Dr. Lynn. You there?
I am. We're having some connection delay.
We're having some connection delays. It's all good. Dr. Lynn is going to connect with us. I'm also going to bring on our other
guest.
Is
it a little better?
What'd you say? There we go. Dr. Lynn, how are you? All right. I think we are having some technical difficulties with Dr. Lynn, but it's all good because we've got another guest as well who is here with us, who is going to also talk about the importance of medical cannabis in our community, and that is Dr. Dare. Welcome to the show, Dr. Dare.
Thank you for having me, Jumi. It's a pleasure to be here.
How are you doing today? Thank you for jumping in with us.
Very well. Very, very well. Thank you.
Awesome. Could you tell our audience a little bit about you and your work in the cannabis space?
Yes, I can. My name is Dario Dumosu, and I am the Chief Executive Officer, as we like to use on the site in the United States. But ex-US, I am considered the Managing Director for Zalira Therapeutics. We are Australia formed, but now a US headquartered global therapeutics biopharmaceutical cannabinoid medicine company. What that really means is that we are focused on the development and commercialization of medicines that are based on cannabinoids, but have clinical validation behind it. We drive a very strong clinical drug development platform out of our Australia program, where medical cannabis is fully and federally legal. And then we channel those developed products into the global commercial markets, such as the United States, and with footprints in Germany and in the UK. So
amazing. So it really is a global company. And so your background is one of a scientist, and you have studied how cannabinoid. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, cool. So can you tell us what is it in medical marijuana that makes it a viable treatment for people with various conditions?
To answer that question, I always want to remind people, just to set the stage, that it used to be about 90, but now is really about 80% of the medicines that are on the marketplace today are actually derived from some form of a natural compound. So the world itself is not strange to natural compound medicine, for which, if we go back into history, cannabis has the longest documented history of efficacy and safety. The plant has a natural occurring abundance of somewhere between 100 and 150 characterized cannabinoids, such as you hear of CBD, THC, tetrahydrocannabinol, and cannabidiol, cannabigerol, and then on top of that, an abundance of what we call terpenes and other molecular entities such as flavonoids.
Okay.
So the permutation and combination of all of those really present for us what I call a new pharmacology that allows us to address a myriad of indication-specific as well as general presented ailments across several therapeutic areas.
Okay. And so if somebody has a specific condition, are there different ones that are better, or how do they know what to do, what to take?
Thank you for that question, actually. Part of it is, one, the history from whence we've come to really come into a medical program, which is fraught with its own problems. But I will address that from two approaches. The first approach is, in the current climate, where there are different presentations of cannabis as medicine, which is cannabis is presented in the natural plant form in some states and within some programs, in several, some people call them strains. I think the proper description is chemovarieties, the chemovars. There are people that are very, very much involved in what we call strain or chemovar ailment alignment, and programs like a National Holistic Healing Center out of DC, Dr. Shanda Macias, but also programs like ours, where we're actually very, very much diving into the molecular level. As my background is in biochemistry, molecular medicine, and where we look at the very specific cannabinoid combinations and terpene combinations with those cannabinoids to address and target very specific ailments, like we try to do with our autism and insomnia. And for example, with our insomnia, Zalira has actually in 2020 released data from the first of its kind in the world traditional clinical trial, which is a placebo-controlled, double-blinded crossover where cannabinoid-based medicine was used to treat chronic insomnia. So those are the two approaches that we like to really put forward, which is whether it's the whole plant and it with a alignment, or in formulation. So,
and okay, and so it's something that has been proven, obviously, to help with a lot of different conditions, yet the federal government still sees it as a Schedule I drug that's illegal, and it's only a few states, or 36 states, that allow it in their particular, in their state. So what is it? Why isn't the federal government, recognizing it as a viable treatment?
I said earlier, Jumi, and if we're captives, unfortunately, of our history. That in 2021, we're still having a conversation about the scheduling of marijuana, as they termed it then, but really it should be called cannabis, the Schedule I drug, when even a higher schedule than than cocaine or fentanyl, And the reason I make that reference is this is a function of the lapses in our government in the 70s, and the history precedes us. And so when we focus on that, that is why we find ourselves in a state where there is a federal-state dichotomy, and there are people that are working hard to reconcile that federal-state dichotomy. But in the meantime, there are now more than 30 some odd states that have some form of a medical or a combination of a medical and an adult use access program. Personally, I look forward to the day when that would be fully reconciled.
Mhm. I think we all do, because I think it's such an important thing that everybody needs to know, that it can actually truly benefit them. So what do you think is happening with medical organizations and how they're pushing it out, and medical professionals, and how they are, advising their patients when it comes to the use of medical cannabis?
Knowledge is really powerful.
Hmm.
And unfortunately, I don't practice clinical medicine, but I went through a PhD program through a medical school at Loma Linda University, where it was the endocannabinoid system, for example, was not part of my training
Right.
at the time. And this is one of the biggest modular or biochemical modulatory systems that the body really employs to direct its functions.
Hmm.
So when you think about those types of lapses in our education, we must seek proper knowledge,
For sure.
sources, and people who have dedicated themselves to one, re-education, to on undoing the stigma. Especially, we're speaking on the platform of blackdoctors.org.
Yeah,
We not forget the impact of the war on drugs on our community.
for sure.
And it is, having gone through such a history, to now come out and say, oh, everyone should get their hands in this. My uncles, my aunties, my cousins are not excited. As a
Right.
matter of fact, that's a conversation for another day, to,
Yeah.
working side by side to drive real knowledge and understanding. Very specific to your question about the medical field, is that we must continue to evolve our learning, as
Mhm.
education is a very dynamic phenomenon and engagement.
Mhm.
And the knowledge that we then come into allows us to be better, whether we're clinicians or we inform the clinical practice. In Pennsylvania, for example, there's now more than 4,000 physicians who are either registered or are going through the registration program to be a recommending physician. In
Yes.
other states, this is also the case. So there are physicians now who are starting to say, well, if this is an evolving space, then I too must evolve. One
Yes.
last point I want to make. The knowledge really is really been before us. I want to refer us to a document, I think in 2017.
Mhm.
The National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine authored a 487-page document.
487 pages. All right, we're not going to talk about all 487 pages. Give us the quick rundown.
The quick
What it
rundown of
said.
that document is that they categorized a bunch of therapeutic areas and ailments,
Mhm.
for which they believe, based on the review of over 10,000 plus abstracts and hundreds of published articles on the efficacy and
Mhm.
safety of cannabinoids for specific indications, and came to an understanding and a classification about a number of ailments for which they say cannabis is effective,
Right.
another list for which they say there's limited but tending towards positive understanding, and for others where they say there's not enough. So there is really an engagement with the information that is available,
For sure.
as well as the continuance of publishing and making this knowledge available to the greater public.
Well, I love the fact that, that leads me into bringing up our next guest, because I think she is doing an incredible job educating the public, especially in her locale in South Florida. And she's a clinician, and she is somebody that we all need to hear from when it comes to that clinical side of things. So Dr. Dare, we are going to talk to you later, but we are going to bring up Dr. Sophia Lynn, who is an incredible physician in South Florida, who is also, she has a medical platform. And thank you. I know we had some technical difficulties a little bit earlier, but I think we're good now. And I am excited to hear from you, because you're on the front line with this, and you see these patients that have utilized it. And I'm just ready to hear this. Like, what is happening with medical cannabis? Tell us a little bit about you and what you do.
Well, thank you for having me. Thank you for reaching out. This is definitely a platform I've been following for a while. So proud to be on here today and sharing my information, and hopefully someone can, be touched and be informed. And if they need anything further, they can always reach me at askdrlynn.com. via email and via Instagram. I'm much better on my DMs than anything else. Hope all is well. Pleasure to be here. I am in South Florida, definitely frontline emergency medicine physician, been practicing 8 years. And over the last 4 years, 4.5 years, we've been recognized as a medical state to be able to serve patients with medical cannabis. So I help patients acquire their medical marijuana card and educate them about the process, customize prescriptions for them, and give them alternatives to their current regimen. A lot of doctors down here are not aware of the availability and the process and the benefits. So where I come in is where others lack. I'm able to give a solid knowledge base, really break it down and determine if patients are candidates for this product, because everyone's not a candidate.
Everyone's not a candidate. Well, let's just jump right into this, talking about what's available. What are the different types available, and what are the best routes for the different types and the different conditions?
Excellent question, because what's good for one person might not be good for another. Several different ways to deliver it. And remember, this is a per state recommendation. So at this time in Florida, we have edibles, which is our newest available method of delivery. We have flower. We also have vape, which goes in the electronic cartridges. And then we also have topical, we have suppositories. So several different routes. And finally, oral and pills. What I would choose for my patient who has esophageal cancer is not flower or vape, because that would be more irritating to the area. I would choose something like tinctures or edibles, right? Or even topicals, depending on the area we're trying to focus. Versus a patient that's dealing with fibromyalgia and full body pain, I would go with a route that has a quicker delivery method, something like tinctures or flower, or I could also do focus target and do vape treatment as well. Those have a quicker method of delivery and more of an entire body experience to help with relieving pain. So it just all depends on what your goal is, to be honest. For my most common disease processes like anxiety and PTSD and stuff like that, they usually prefer flower or vape. So those are the most popular methods at this time.
So knowing that, okay, there's 36 states and not every physician is as knowledgeable as you when it comes to this. If somebody was to say, okay, I want to try something, how do they know what to do, what's best for them, where to go, and how to just have the conversation with their physician? And who are they talking to?
Absolutely. My first step to any patient is, we're not a tri-state. So it's not like you can just go into the doctor's office and say, hey, I'm curious. You actually have to have one of the 14 qualifying conditions for our state to be legally allowed to try, which there's a little leeway in, deciding that, but it's things like HIV, AIDS, ALS, epilepsy, also PTSD and a few others. But it's a specific condition that you have to qualify. And if you do have a terminal condition, meaning usually less than 12 months left of life, you do have the opportunity to do a try and see if this is something that can offer you a better quality of life and pain relief and things like that. But otherwise, you do have to have a qualifying condition to be approved for a medical marijuana card. First step for me is patients have to do their research. This is not something that is normal for other doctors. And although we're trying really hard to normalize the process of puffing on your vape pen versus taking a pill, so you'll see a lot of hashtags like free the plant, because we want to get people to understand that this is something that's been going on forever, but we're just starting to see it in mainstream, and it's starting to become recognized and become really less mystified. So one of the things that I would say is do your own research, sure that you're using your local registries. Every state should have a medical marijuana registration set up where they list every single doctor that is currently and actively prescribing. And you want to find somebody local in your area with good reviews, because you want to make sure that you have access to that person. So you don't want to choose somebody over 100 miles away. You want somebody close by. So in case you have a negative reaction or if you have questions, so you want to make sure you have that comfort level with them. A lot of times patients will go to their PCP, their primary care doctor, as their first point of contact. And if they get the feedback like, oh, that's not the best choice for you, or I don't really know too much about it, maybe you shouldn't explore it, it really deters patients. So on the side, I try to really emphasize to doctors, because you don't know, don't, push that theory onto patients to let them believe that it's not a choice or an option. really
Right.
refer them out to someone that can give them an educated background on all the options and ways to
Yeah.
deliver cannabis and see if they're a candidate for it. So it goes both ways, with patients being a little bit more aggressive in their approach, finding their questions, understanding the process. And then it comes on the physician side. If you're not knowledgeable, at least have a reference point. Point them to the correct website. Make sure you send them to
or send them to you or something like that.
.org and stuff like that, or send them to me. Yeah. I'd be
So
glad
let's
to help them.
a couple questions that I see now. So first question is, what is flower form? Because if somebody, you know, they want to be educated, let's answer the question. So Albina is asking, what is flower form?
That's bud. So flower is the natural form before it is compressed or extracted into vape. It's the actual whole flower, and you can get it with seeds and stems and get the entire euphoric feel for the plant. So it's the actual bud and the flower that you see the pictures of the plant, the Cannabis genus.
Okay. And as somebody suffering from chronic pain, what strain, if they were to come to you, what strain would be recommended?
So now, I don't like to talk in terms of strains, because strains is really patient specific. I like to talk more in terms of THC. So for someone that has never smoked before, I like to do a lower percentage of THC and work its way up. And the reason why I say that is CBD has good anti-inflammatory properties, but THC is known for its pain control and relief. So THC has a wide variety of percentages. So you always tell patients, if you're a naive virgin patient to medical marijuana, start with a lower dosage and work your way up, because the goal is to find that sweet spot where you get minimal amount of product with maximal amount of relief. And remember, this is all a cash process for most states. So you don't want to overextend your pocket or your budget. You always want to be conscious of that. So percentage wise, I would say, no, I would definitely say take your time with it. You want to grow through the process. Sometimes you have to use something multiple times to see if it reacts well with you, and you want to slowly move into that. So I would definitely say THC is something that you should be analyzing and thinking about. And when you go to the dispensary, they'll show you all different types of strains. They're all gummy bears. It's just a matter if you want the red gummy bear, the yellow gummy bear, the green one, the purple one. You know, it's all. When you start getting into strains are like flavors and flavonoids. And so I'm like, it's
so
whatever
that you mentioned
girl.
something a little earlier in terms of it works differently for everybody. And so I have a question here. It's, can it be addictive, and how do you prevent the abuse even when you are using it for pain?
Excellent question. The most important thing for me when I screen patients, I'm a very stringent provider. Everyone's not like me. You know, some people are going for more masses and quantity and things like that. But I like to keep my practice boutique. I'm very customer specialized and specific. So I screen patients really heavily before even entering this relationship with them, because it's a relationship. It's like we're dating, you know. It's not just me throwing a pill at you and telling you to figure it out. It's really an art to how you develop and customize what works for each patient. So I think the biggest thing to me is making sure that the candidate is committed for at least 3 to 6 months. When you get your card, it's a $75 card in the state of Florida that's good for 1 year. But you have to be committed to the process with me for at least 3 to 6 months. I don't want you going to the dispensary, spending $150 and trying stuff one time and saying it doesn't work, right? Because the worst form of criticism is, you know, just hearing a bad review from one patient. And for that reason, you'll lose 10 future patients, right? So you want to make sure you're really working with the candidate to make sure that they find what works best for them. And whether that means changing up the delivery system, alternating the strains, making sure that they're using at the most effective time of day to achieve proper relief. All of that is a customization process. I can't write out 2 puffs every 6 hours for every person, because it doesn't work like that, you know?
Yeah. So if somebody doesn't
the commitment of the patient and the heavy screening process I do.
That's important. If somebody doesn't have a
Those
dispensary,
2 things for me are the biggest way to weed out patients.
I think we're talking. If somebody doesn't have a dispensary in their locale, right? Can they grow their own?
Yes.
They can. Okay, so it is legal to grow your own and use that
it
as
is
your
state specific as well.
Okay.
So in Florida, patients are not allowed to grow their own personal plants at all, period.
Okay.
But in California, where there's, and other states where recreational, and even other states that are medicinal, you have to check per state. There is usually a quantity that is allowed for personalized individual use for growing plants. And I will tell you, it sounds very easy, like put some seeds in a pot, add some water and some sunlight, let it grow. It's not
No.
easy. Like growth,
I'm trying to take
growing
care of a plant, like
actual,
not a marijuana plant, but a regular plant, and it
no.
didn't work out so well. So I know.
No, it's actually a process. You got to love the plant. You have to talk to the plant. You have to trim the plant.
Mm,
It's not something that, I just say it is a cheaper method once you get a handle on it because you don't have to spend as much. But you might go through bad seasons where you've been growing this crop for 6 weeks and then all of a sudden it dies on you. So you
yeah.
have to really be thoughtful and committed to the process of growth. Growth is not an easy thing for a lot of people. And I'm not a green thumb, so I, can't tell you personally about it,
Yeah.
but I will tell you when I go to the dispensaries and I visit the grow houses and I see the kind of love and dedication it takes
Mm,
to produce a beautiful bud, that's an art.
that's
That's a whole mission in and of itself.
So what can we do knowing that it's such a like it can help with so many conditions? What
Yeah.
can you do or what can you say to people who have that aversion to using it or people who say if medical cannabis laws are just a way for people to get high legally? Like how do we change the conversation?
Excellent point. How do we change the conversation surrounding cannabis? And I'll tell you, I would have initially thought my greatest aversion would have been my elderly patients, but I forget they're also from a hippie generation where
Exactly.
they
From the
previously used marijuana and are
right.
dying to get legal with it. They're like, bring it on, super legal. So I have a great elderly population who are, like my advertising box, and they just go back to their friends and their bingo nights, and they're like, "Girl, do you try this?" Like it's word of mouth for me. It's all word of mouth for me, and they share with their friends and stuff like that. But
So it's the younger people that
it
are
was
averse to it. Who
surprising
is
to
it?
me. It was surprising to me that conversation really comes from just people who are more conservative in their nature. It's a personalized conservatism that really deters patients from being open to try the process because they've been so conditioned to pop 10, 15, 20 pills a day and
Mhm,
not consider alternate methods and not
mhm.
also be able to afford that. Because remember, the affording process of it is cash out of pocket anywhere
Yeah.
from, I'd say, $90 to $180 a month, depending on what you choose. It
Yeah.
is really a commitment, and to not be 100% guaranteed that you're going to get immediate relief until you give it a few tries and build up and find your sweet spot. It takes a lot from patients, and it takes a commitment of patience and also a desire to really want to learn and change their quality of life and their practice of life. Some patients
Mhm.
are just comfortable with where they're at, taking their 10, 20, 30 pills, and they're okay with that. But for those who want a more of a natural, holistic, non-addictive approach, they're seeking me out. I don't
Mm.
have to do billboards and print and all that digital stuff. They're finding me because they're
Yeah.
looking for that. And those are patients that I want, because regardless if it works on the first time or not, they want to learn, they want to grow, they want to expand. So they're coming in with an already desire to
Are they
change their
coming
life.
in?
So that I can reach you.
Are they coming in already taking all of the medications that they're taking, plus then, adding the cannabis treatment, and then maybe you're seeing them later and they're like, I'm only using medical cannabis for my condition now.
So what I always do with my patients, especially the ones that have been on chronic medications, especially things like narcotics and benzos and opiates, if they've been on that for several years, I never go cold turkey with changing them. What
Okay.
I do initially is a process where I'm upgrading. So we're going low with cannabis and we're introducing it, and we're starting to slowly upgrade till we find a time and a specific amount and a strain and whatever it is that you're using that works for you. At that point, you start downgrade what you've been chronically on, whether it's Percocet or Vicodin or Ativan or Ambien, whatever you've been taking, start to downgrade that. And we do that scaling process over a 3 to 4 week period. So there's never a cold turkey withdrawal kind of symptomatic, experience that they have, which makes them turned off of the process.
Right.
So we slowly downgrade. For most patients, it's about a 90-day window where I find that they're able to completely reduce or diminish or exclude, the medications that they were previously on. And if that is your intention, then that's what I'm going to help you achieve. For some people, they want to use medical marijuana as their breakthrough relief. So they're chronically on pain medication or whatever it is that they're doing, epidurals, topicals, whatever it is they're doing, but they have breakthrough pain. And because of the immediate relief with doing flower or doing edibles or doing tinctures, they use that for their breakthrough pain. So it all depends on the intention of the patient. And I try to meet them where their goal is and help them to see other avenues for methods.
That is so important, because I feel like that kind of care and concern of like what you're feeling now, but where you want to go is kind of what we're missing a lot of times with a lot of providers. Is that they're just like, well, this is what it is. This is what you're going to take. It doesn't really matter. But then to add the care and concern holistically, that's critical.
Yeah.
Are there certain conditions
definitely.
that it is only medical cannabis that can treat it?
No. No. There isn't anything that I would say exclusive to medical cannabis. It has to be, remember, these are conditions that have been established over several years and have had regimens for treatment. And now the research has turned to, can cannabis and THC and CBD be effective? So they all, for example, epilepsy has had its seizure regimen and control process. But now we're understanding the benefits of cannabis and CBD and using that as either an alternate or an additional property to help decrease the amount of Keppra or Dilantin neuron and stuff like that. So we're using it as complementary and then finding certain doses that can help patients achieve relief where they have less breakthrough seizures and stuff like that. But these are all established conditions over years that have had proposed treatments for them. And now the understanding of the science and the process has lended itself to support the use of cannabis for it.
For the treatments. And so we've talked about the treatments. We know that it can, heal a lot of different conditions, but we have to be aware that there are certain side effects for certain people.
Absolutely.
What are some
and I see it
you've seen and that people should be aware of?
Absolutely. So I'm in the emergency room. So I'm an ER attendant.
Firsthand.
I see it all. So I see the good and the bad, right?
Yeah.
And some people just have a innate aversion to cannabis, and they can produce something called cannabis hyperemesis syndrome, where you're profusely vomiting. So it's called cannabis hyperemesis, meaning massive amounts of vomiting syndrome. So cannabis hyperemesis syndrome is a very common side effect of cannabis. It's not seen often, but it is innately for people who are adverse to cannabis and cannot use it at all. So I have to always be aware of that. And you really try to detail how many times have you vomited? Do you notice you only vomit when you use cannabis? Stuff like that. That's one of the rare, but side effects that are very critical because it can change your electrolytes, it can change your tolerance and all of that stuff. So you want to make sure that you're identifying it and properly telling patients, you're not really the one that needs to use this, And then there's also side effects of not death. We've never seen somebody, quote unquote, die from cannabis, but we've seen somebody have a bad trip, right? We've seen somebody become hyper anxious and hyper vigilant when they're using cannabis. So we've seen the aversion that they've had with it, and making sure that you let them know, maybe you went a little too hard on the edibles. Maybe you need to really scale how you're using and consider what other drugs you're using at the same time, because there is the potential for interaction with other medications. So you always want to make sure that you properly educate patients about diet, about, if you're doing alcohol or wine when you're taking your cannabis, thinking, do you smoke? What's your body fat index? Things like that all affect the processing of cannabis and making sure that its absorption is effective for you. So it takes a lot. It
Yeah.
definitely takes a lot, not to deter anybody, but to be thoughtful and conscious. And that's with anything you introduce to your body.
sure.
I tell patients that all the time. Even Motrin and Tylenol, over-the-counter medications,
They've got
patients
their
always can have
issues.
side effects as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's so important to take into consideration. Is that the same case for all of the different forms? Like, is there a way to dose too much with the creams or anything like that? Or is it just the inhalation and the edibles?
I would say the most common side effects I see are with vape and also with vape, edibles, and flower.
Okay.
Edibles, because patients believe, oh my gosh, it's not taking effect. I took it an hour ago. Let me take 2 more.
Right.
Oh my God, I don't feel it yet. Let me pop 3 more. And then by the time it kicks in, it's like a delayed reaction. And they're like holding onto the table, like, what is going on? Where am I? So it is that delayed reaction. Straight trip. And the problem is, if you're out, if you're not in a place and no one knows what's going on, you come in the ER, they can't even tell you, I took, 10, 20 milligrams edibles or whatever. I took a cookie or I took this. So you're trying to figure out, like, what do you think? What's going on? But I see that because patients often underestimate the power of the edible. The edible is no joke. And the reason why I say that is because it has a lot to do with what you recently ate, because it goes through your digestive system. So if you're taking edibles on an empty stomach versus if you're taking edibles on a full stomach, it'll take longer to kick in. If you're taking edibles when you're drinking alcohol, it'll kick in faster, things like that. You have to be conscious of your surroundings and when you're doing it. And if you've ever done it before or never done it before, you want to make sure that you're in an environment where it's controlled and you got a sober friend with you to oversee the situation.
Right.
And then with cannabis, not necessarily as much medical cannabis, but with cannabis that's not delivered from dispensaries, there's always the potential to have it laced with something else, to not know who the grower is. Oftentimes when you're buying black market, you're not asking, where is this bud coming from and who grew this and what kind of pesticides are in it, versus when you go to the dispensary, you're getting a full list of the percentage of THC, the percentage of cannabinoids, the percentage of, everything that is detailed in this flower that's been analyzed and approved to be a possibility for the dispensaries to administer. So it has to be approved in its process. So it's more with recreational marijuana that I see adverse side effects than with dispensary grade cannabis.
Okay. And that is such an important point, because that is the biggest thing. Like, you want to have medical cannabis to improve your condition, not make it any worse. So don't go somewhere that is not to a licensed grower to get your cannabis, because it's going to make something worse than what you started with.
Yeah. And then you're going to think you're not a candidate for it. And that's not the case. You just had the wrong, you had the wrong batch.
You went to the wrong place, people. Don't do that. Don't do that.
Wrong people.
So there was a question that just came up about cannabis edibles and nausea. What do you think about that? Is that's really good for nausea?
So a lot of my oncology physicians use cannabis for nausea specifically, and there are certain strains that are better than others. And if anyone's interested, you can go to Leafly, LEAFLY.com. They do a great periodic table and analysis of strains, and they'll tell you specifically which one have been promoted for anti-nausea, anti-emetics, and it will help you to understand why and which one is best for you. But yeah, it's a great complement, especially in the form of edibles or vaping, because usually when you're nauseous, you can't really ingest anything like a pill because it often comes back up. Edibles have a nice dissolvable property to them and a good absorption in the submucosa area. So,
well, there you go. Thank you for exploring that and telling us more about that, and for the leafly.com resource. I think it's stuff like this, just having the conversation and being so transparent about it is important for all of us, to just be able to be comfortable having a conversation with our physician to say, hey, I learned about it, but tell me more. Let's have a conversation. Let me know what my treatment options are.
And I think that's the biggest thing. Know your choices. And once you are educated on what your options are, and then you can decide if you want to try, if you want to make that financial and timely investment, if you want to really do a little bit of research, because it is a two-way relationship and understanding the process. I always like to pair a naive patient with someone who has had experience with cannabis. And I asked them, I was like, more people in your family are using than you know. Ask your cousins, ask your grandkids, ask your daughter, your son, like more people are using than you know. So try to take one or two of them to the dispensary with you, and you can go through that education process together. So that way, if you forget something, or if you have questions, you always have kind of an immediate backup. And then you have me as a first or second tier as well, because I work crazy hours. So I'm always available via text. My patients have my personal cell phone number, so they know how to reach me and things like that. So I really try to make sure that the experience is helpful and useful and pleasant for patients, because we want them to come back and we want them to get other people on board, because it's all, the wave right now, but it's more than just a wave. It's something that's going to be here, and it's really going to change the industry of pharmaceuticals, as our previous doctor was saying, and Western medicine in general. Our goal is to make cannabis a first-line therapy and not a last or final option for patients to use.
Absolutely. Well, let's bring Dr. Dari back onto the stream and just give us some lasting. Welcome back, Dr. Dari. Still there with us?
Thank you. I'm so. I really enjoyed listening to Dr. Lynn. It's always good to hear the clinicians really break it down.
Yeah, I think this combination has been really good to hear from both sides, and just to really, I want you all to leave us with some advice that we can take and have these conversations around the dinner table today, tomorrow, ongoing, about how we can feel comfortable incorporating and having the conversations about medical cannabis and using it, because like you said, it's not going away. It's only going to continue to get better. It's going to continue to be part of our healthcare system. So what, Dr. Dare, is something that you would leave with our audience today about the importance of medical cannabis and being comfortable utilizing it?
Some people have heard me say this, and I tend to personalize it when I've said cannabis saved my life. And the way I kind of break it down is, I, like many others, as Dr. Lynn was saying, was raised to really not understand cannabis until I was I was about 3 weeks to defending my thesis, subunit vaccine, specialty molecular genetics. And I was, I was really suffering from insomnia. At that time, I was not even in the presence of mind to characterize it as such. It got very bad and I had to see a doctor. And I remember a friend of mine saying to me, "You can't sleep, you need to just smoke some weed." And I was very angry with him. I was actually very cross with him. And he went on to tell me, he said, "Look, there's going to be a road you may end up taking where you're going to start with the ambience of the world." And I just use that as an example. And you're going to go down a certain road. And by the time you make that turnaround, it may be too late. I remember starting with Ambien, and I had one of those bad reactions and hallucinations. But I want to pause for a second and just kind of think about what that means. I was leading a lab, I was driving a car, and I was having all of these types of issues. Now, I had not slept for about 3 days at that time. I went back to my friend and I said, "I think I'm going to die if I don't sleep tonight." And I was open enough and strong enough to say, "Max, I need help. I really want to," and he took me to a doctor, like a Dr. Lynn. I got the education I needed. And that was the first time I tried cannabis. This is the best part. I went to sleep for what felt like 5 minutes. I had been asleep for 9 hours plus.
Wow.
The next morning, my body was reset.
You're like, ah.
I remember saying to my friends, then I said, "I'm a scientist. I need somebody to help me unlearn what I just learned about my body." And that was the beginning for me of my journey to where I am today. So my advice to everyone is, ask questions, please. Ask questions about medical cannabis. It may save your life. So.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. I think some people, they're afraid to ask the questions, but of course we know why. We know the history of cannabis, and especially with our community, it's not something that we are, we're still getting, there's still so many issues with it. I mean, we could go into that on another show, but there's so many issues with it. People are not comfortable with it. So I do appreciate you encouraging people to ask the questions and to find these individuals like yourself and Dr. Lynn, where they can feel comfortable having a conversation, because you all understand them. You all understand us. You all have the same experience and you've seen it. So what about you, Dr. Lynn? What are some things that you want to leave with our audience today?
I mean, you don't know unless you ask, right? So like
Yeah.
said, if you don't ask, you're really doing yourself a disadvantage and a disservice to understand what's available to you. You know, you're going to continue on the same stale regimen of 20 pills a day and not really explore the possibility of living a better quality life.
That is true.
That's very true. And those 20 pills a day, oh man. If you can go from that to just something that is a simple, this can streamline your treatment plan. And if that's something that can streamline your treatment plan, make your life a lot more simple, then why not give it a try, right?
Absolutely. And once you commit to the process, you'll be able to teach others. So it's more than just holding that information. That's part of my commitment and my obligation and my privilege to be able to educate others on the process and give them choice.
Well, thank you both so much. I mean, the goal of today's show was to definitely bring attention to our community and inspire all of you watching to learn and talk about the medical benefits of cannabis. And I really hope that you have tuned in and you've watched this and you have really taken this all in. Even if you're watching the replay, I hope that you're learning something. Please make sure to share this episode, because I'm sure there's people who didn't get a chance to watch that would love to see what we talked about here today. You know, as you heard from Dr. Lynn and Dr. Dare, cannabis is a safe and efficient natural medicine for many conditions, and especially chronic illnesses, or chronic pain, which plagues so many people, sleep issues, so many different things that you can really benefit and heal with medical cannabis. But of course, like they were saying as well, you have to talk to your medical professional. Be comfortable, ask the questions, do what you need to do your research to make sure that it is the best thing for you. So thank you all again for joining me this week. Remember, you can always watch this episode on the blackdoctor.org Facebook or YouTube channels. You can also check it out on podcasts, wherever you watch or wherever you listen to podcasts. Just search for Jump In with Jumi. I will be back again next week, same time, same place. And you don't want to miss next week's episode, because we're talking all about your crowning glory, and that is your hair. So thank you all again for joining me. I will see you all next week, same time, same place. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.